Good morning, colleagues. Good morning to the participants in today's workshop. Just by a show of virtual thumb, may you please indicate that you can hear me well, and you can also see this video that I'm sharing with you. Thank you so much for the indication. We welcome you to the Research Capacity Development Unit, University of Johannesburg workshop on Faculty of Health Science, proposal writing and submission procedures. I'm Dr. Gabriel Monyera from the Postgraduate School, the Research Capacity Development Unit, and I'll be moderating the session for today. So why is it important that we must have a conversation around the issue of proposal writing and also the submission procedures that are followed within different departments or faculties of the university? I think I will just you know sum it up in that a successful research proposal also entails that the whole research that you are going to do or the whole research endeavor, the writing process, everything will also be a success. So if you well conceptualize, be able to propose what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, um, it's evaluated whether is it feasible, does it work or it doesn't work. If it's accepted, then also your chances of completing the study that you would have started, they are very high. So before we proceed, I would want to remind you that this session is being recorded, and I also want to thank all the participants for taking their time, to join us. But most importantly, I want to thank our facilitator for today for his efforts with preparing and agreeing to facilitate the workshop for today. But before I introduce the facilitator to you, I would like to just go over some housekeeping rules. The first one is that if you have any questions that you would want to ask, during the presentation, you must feel free to raise your virtual hand or speak. By if you want to speak, then we'll have to unmute your mic and you can speak. Alternatively, you can just type your question in the chat box and I'll bring it to the attention of the facilitator. Also, the session is being recorded and the presentation slides will be requested from the facilitator, and both the recording and the slides will be uploaded on our Moodle communities before the end of the week. That is after we assess the suitability of uploading the content on our Moodle communities. And a feedback survey will also be shared with you during the course of the facilitation or the presentation. And we kindly request that you fill it out, for us to gain insights into how useful this workshop has been, and also for our future preparations. We also use it to provide, feedback to the facilitator in terms of how the session went, from the perspective of the participants. We launched the Research Capacity Development Management System in March, and we are gradually migrating to this new system. So we ask that for those who are from the University of Johannesburg, registered at the University of Johannesburg, we ask you to register on this system. This is the system that we are going to be migrating to, where you can access our workshops, our research writing consultations, where you can make booking for research writing consultations and stay updated of all the events and services that the RCD offer, all in one place. So you have to register to utilize this system. You can access it through the U-Link under the services tab or by visiting the rcdms.uj.ac.za. Okay, this said, I would now like to introduce our facilitator for today, Mr. Musa Jaite. I will read the bio of Mr. Musa Jaite in your hearing. Mr. Musa Jaite is a PhD student in public health and a research assistant at the South African Medical Research Council / University of Johannesburg. Pan-African Center for Epidemics Research extramural unit with the Faculty of Health Sciences. Mr. Jayete holds a Master of Science in Reproductive Health Sciences and a first degree in nursing. He's a professional nurse and an early career researcher with a deep interest in public health innovations, including the use of machine learning to improve health outcomes. Mr. Jayete has previously engaged in nursing and public and reproductive health research. With this, I'm delighted to hand over to Mr. Jayete, who will be leading us through the workshop for today. Mr. Jayete, we appreciate your time and your expertise, and we look forward to your valuable insights. And I hand over to you. You can, I'll stop sharing my slides so that you can share your slides and lead us from here henceforth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gabriel. Good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Good morning, Mr. Jayete. Yes, we can hear you. I can also see indications from the participants that they can hear you as well.
Okay, thank you very much once again. And thanks for inviting me to facilitate this session. I also want to express my sincere gratitude to the Postgraduate Office for the trust and confidence in me to facilitate this workshop. Good morning, attendees. It is a pleasure to have you all join us on this workshop, Proposal Writing and Submission Procedures. I'll be taking you through sorry, a minute, okay, my slide is moving now. So I'll be taking you through the steps in writing research proposal and the submission procedure to various committees within the University of Johannesburg. So here is the overview of my presentation, starting with proposal writing, then we have introduction, literature review, problem statement, research questions, aim and objectives, methodology, referencing, appendices. And on the other end, we have submission procedures to the Departmental Research Committee, Higher Degrees Committee, and then the Research and Ethics Committee. But before going further, I just want to acknowledge the presence of my supervisor, Dr. Edith Palani. Thank you very much for joining us. And I also want to acknowledge the presence of my PESA colleagues. I am very grateful for your support. I can see friends and family from the Gambia. I know it's very early there, so you joining this soon means a lot to me. Thank you very much for your time. So we first of all want to talk about what research means before we delve into research proposal. When we talk about research, we are talking about a systematic, a rigorous investigation of a situation or a problem to generate new knowledge or validate existing knowledge. Okay, we are talking about a situation or a problem here because if a research is not about a problem, that is not researchable. And then the main reasons for conducting research is either to generate new knowledge or to validate existing knowledge. It is also referred to as a scientific procedure that investigates and then provide findings to a particular problem. And it should be described, explore, or explain in a way that it provides solution to a particular problem. Research is a continuous process. What we mean by this is we realize that when we are conducting research, we are already conducting a research on a topic that has already been done by some people, maybe in a different setting. So we want to do it in a different setting to see whether we are going to come up with the same conclusion or whether we are going to have discrepancies. And if there are differences, we want to know the reasons for these discrepancies. For instance, if someone conducts a research on maybe the factors associated with HIV testing in the US, and then come up with various factors, one might also want to conduct a similar study in South Africa to find out if, the results are going to be similar. There are two possibilities. One, they could generate similar results. They could generate different results because there are people from South Africa and people from the US have different socio-cultural background. So this could be reasons why there could be discrepancies. And this, same scenario applies to drug development, research, and the like. So like we said, investigation using scientific procedures is what research is. And it is done by searching again and again to find out the truth. This is what research is about. It is a continuous process. So now when we talk about research proposal, it is a formal and a well-structured tool that guides a researcher on the steps to take to carry out an investigation. It presents details of a research project. It describes the research topic and problem statement. It gives step-by-step details of a research methodology, and it helps students, people who are working in organizations, those who are applying for funding. For instance, in our situations, for students, we are doing research proposal to complete a dissertation. Students also do research proposal to fulfill requirements. In the same time, people also write research proposal seeking for funding. If you want to convince a donor to fund your research, you need to write a very detailed research proposal to be able to convince them that you have the capacity to carry out that research. And if they give you money, you will use it for the intended purposes. What are the main contents of a research proposal in the Faculty of Health Sciences? So we have the title page, executive summary, introduction, literature review, problem statement, research questions, aim and objectives, methodology, and references. We know that like within different faculties or different departments, there may be some discrepancies, but nonetheless, these are basic contents of every research proposal. Every research proposal must contain these items. Either it is written exactly as this or not, but these are very critical items in every research proposal. And then before we talk about research proposal, we need to start with topic selection. It's very important because you cannot talk about a research without having a topic. That is the starting point. So in order to select a research topic, one needs to have a diary. Why is this important? It's important because before you finalize your research topic, you may want to explore different topics and then find out with the best one you think might suit whatever question you want to answer. One may also be curious to identify problems, maybe within the homes, within our immediate environments, within the school, within the health facilities, and then list down various topics and do a pre-screening. Another important thing is, falling in love with the topic of interest. Today, if you are doing a research that you are not interested in, it's going to end up maybe very bad because research is very tedious. For you to be able to carry out a research effectively, you need to build interest in the topic that you are researching on. It's very, very important. And you also need to narrow down the topic. I remember one of my former lecturers used to say that we should not be too ambitious because like I said, research is a continuous process. So you do your part and allow other people to also do their part. That is why it's important to narrow it down to be able to, allow you to also carry out the research without much burden. You need to do background reading, literature review on various topics, to find out, the new things that have been said about that topic. Because let's say now the COVID-19 is over. Still now people are researching on COVID-19, but there are certain topics, if you want to research it on COVID-19, you may find it very boring and you may not even have, a large potential readers of that research. People might not be interested in that, in certain topics with regards to COVID-19. This is just an example, but there are still, very interesting things that people can research about COVID-19. So you need to review guidelines and notes. Before preparing this slide, I had to review the guidelines from the Faculty of Health Sciences, since I'm talking about research proposal for the Faculty of Health Sciences. It's very, very important. So when you are conducting a research in any, department or any faculty, you need to have the faculty or departmental guidelines to guide you on how to effectively write the proposal. Because at the end of the day, they are the ones to approve your research. Then you need to discuss with your supervisor. Very, very important, because in as much as you have to be interested in that topic, your supervisor also has to be interested in the topic. Otherwise, you may have your supervisor review 1 page of your proposal once a week, 1 page a week, because he or she is not interested in that topic. So that is why it's important to discuss and come to terms with your supervisor regarding the topic that you should research on. Then what makes a good research topic? The identified topic must answer some questions, which are also called the 5 W's. And the first one is identifying what the problem is. You need to be able to ask yourself, what problem are you trying to solve with your research? Like I said, if your research is not solving a problem, then it's not researchable. Then why is it a problem? You ask yourself, this is a problem, but why is it really a problem? What is the magnitude? Is it really affecting people? Is it affecting resources? Is it affecting the environment? These are some of the questions you need to ask yourself when coming up with a research topic. Then, who is affected by the problem? You need to be able to define your target population, and this should reflect in the topic. You need to also state where you're going to conduct that research. And when did the problem occur? Or is it currently occurring, or when will it occur? These are very critical questions you need to ask yourself when coming up with a research topic. So we move to the title page. This is usually the first page of the research proposal, and it is usually very brief and self-explanatory. I also remember a professor once told us that when he writes, he makes sure that his grandmother in the village is able to read. So when coming up with a research topic, do not come up with a very complicated topic that people have to Google to understand what you're talking about. Make it very simple. So the next thing that you need to indicate on the title page is the name of the faculty that you are currently studying in, the name of the university, and the qualifications the proposal is fulfilling. If it is a master's, you mention. If it is a PhD, you mention. Then your student number, your name and student number also have to be on the title page. And then the name of your supervisors, the date. Then the next page on the research proposal is the executive summary. From the word summary, basically, it's referring to a summary of the entire proposal. And to do this, you can either have it in a structured or unstructured way, depending on the guidelines given to you by your faculty or your department. Then in either ways, there are few items that need to be captured in the executive summary. And the first one is background, then the aim of the study, methods, and expected outcomes. One should be able to read the executive summary and understand the entire proposal. That is the essence. It comes, I can say, in the beginning of the proposal, but it's usually written last. You write the executive summary when you complete everything, because it's a summary. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the introduction. From the executive summary, now we come to the proposal proper, and the first item in the proposal is the introduction. And in some cases, they are numbered, like in the Faculty of Health Sciences. And in certain cases, people use chapters. But here we are adhering to the guidelines of the Faculty of Health Sciences. So the first section, which is the introduction, needs to also capture very critical items. You need to introduce the topic to the readers. You need to give it a context, give it a contextual background. If you're talking about HIV testing, why is it important to research on HIV testing? You know, is there an issue? Are people not testing? Are people dying of HIV? And then establish a research problem. Talk about the magnitude of the problem. Summarize existing literatures. State existing gaps. What are the gaps? What have people said? Specify your study objectives in the introduction. It's very important. There is something important that you need to know when writing a research proposal. There is no definitive formula in writing a research proposal, oh, an introduction, sorry. There's no definitive approach in writing an introduction. True, there are certain items which are critical to be captured, but you don't need to necessarily have a formula to say that, you know, this is what I need to put here, this is what I need to put here. You just be innovative, capture essential information in the introduction, make it attractive and interesting to your readers, then mention facts. In as much as you want to make it interesting, you don't just write your opinions. You need to cite what other people have said, reference what other people have said about that topic. Because scientific research is not just about opinions, it's about facts. In as much as you can, you know, include your opinions, you also need to, you know, base your argument on facts. So then the next part is the literature review. So the literature review basically is a brief description of existing literature on the topic or the research problem. You need to focus on your main objectives. Make subheadings. For instance, if you are doing a study on the prevalence and factors associated with HIV testing, you need to make sure that your literature review talks about prevalence and talks about factors associated with HIV testing. If you want, you can use the inverted pyramid where you give the global context, then you come regionally, then locally. Then this is just a brief literature review based on our guideline. Then discuss study gaps, compare and contrast with other findings. And it's mainly empirical based on our guidelines. It's very brief. It's different with universities where you need to have the literature review as a chapter. In those cases, you can do empirical literature review and conceptual or whatsoever. But in our situation, you only talk about conceptual and theoretical frameworks in the main research, not the proposal. Then the problem statement describes the research problem. It talks about the magnitude of the problem, the extent of the problem, what people have said about the problem, what is already known, then what is not known, what is lacking. Is it knowledge gap? Is it research gap? Is it data gap? It depends on what you want to, the question you want to answer. What will your study add? These are the things that a good problem statement must contain. Then the next section is research questions. So the research question forms a critical aspect of the proposal. It is established before even embarking on the research. Before you start a research, you need to have your research questions right. It also depends on the type of study, the length and topic. The entire research revolves around the research question, because now when you complete your research, you should go back and evaluate your research to see that your research questions have been answered properly. Then we move to the aim and objectives of the study. They form the scope, depth, and direction of the research. In a nutshell, I can say that the aim and objectives are the heart of your research. This is what tells people what you want to find out. They give focus and clarity on the research. And with regards to the aim, it describes the overarching goal. It gives the broader context of the research. And it answers the questions what the research intends to find out. The objectives are more specific and they answer the question how the particular aim will be achieved. And it is derived from the study aim. Study objective must be very, very SMART, which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, and time-bound. Then we take a short break. I don't want to make the presentation very boring. I can take one or two questions. Otherwise, we move to methodology and other sections. Is there any question in the chat?
Let me check the chat for you, Mr. Jaite. Let me just open my chat box. I don't see any question in the chat for the meantime, but let me just also allow the mics of all the participants so that they can unmute themselves and be able to ask the question. If they have any question or contribution that they want to make to the conversation that you are having with them so far. So I've allowed the mic of our attendees. So just raise your virtual hand, then we allow you to unmute yourself and then you make your contribution or you ask a question. We see a hand. You can go on, unmute yourself and go on. YJ, you can unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Okay, thank you so much, Musa. Mr. Musa, if I can call you that now. Am I audible? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yes. Yes, thank you so much. We are learning a lot. Just a question regarding the literature review. Yes, where you talked about like comparing and contrasting. So is it also important to try to see some of the gaps in those literatures, like kind of critiquing them? Like if you have two studies, you're trying to show how they are similar, and then why are they similar? You know, if they have similar results or if they have contrasting results, would it be important to point, based on their methodology, to point out why those observations or that kind of thing exists? For example, if you're looking at HIV, the trend, if you find that in one part of the country the prevalence is low, in another part of the country the prevalence is high, why is that the case? Based on their methodology or based on the type of testing method that were used or the procedures? Is that important to point out? That is the question.
Thank you very much, Yankuba, for that brilliant question. Yes, it's very, very important. It's very, very important to discuss the gaps and then state reasons why you think there may be those gaps and even suggest solutions in certain cases. It's possible. You can definitely do that. Thank you very much. Then we now move to the methodology. So the methodology section, I can say that is the brain and body of the research proposal. It outlines the steps, procedures to address the research questions. Critical questions in the research methodology relates to what methods will be utilized to collect data and analyze data. Why are the selected methods suitable? What procedures will be followed and why? Do the chosen methods correspond to the study aim? These are questions that one needs to ask him or herself when developing the methodology of the research proposal. So now we talk about the study design, which is usually the first section of the methodology. It is a framework, or we can call it sets of methods, or we can call it procedures used to collect and analyze data on variables specified in a particular research problem. In order to answer a research problem, we need to select a design that is suitable in answering that research problem. Sometimes understanding study designs can be a bit tricky. So I'm using the blessings of my supervisor, Professor Rafili. I took some portions of a presentation she made during my master's program, and I'm going to use that to explain, the concepts of study design. So we want to apply the concepts of epidemiology to explain study design for people to understand it better. So epidemiology, we know, determines disease trends and patterns. We know that, it examines what causes or prevent diseases. And then there are key items which are very important in epidemiology. We call variable, defined as characteristics that can be measured and that can assume different values. And these are examples. We are interested in relationship between outcomes and exposures. This is to help us to understand different types of studies. That is why I'm bringing this. So right now, what we need to put in our head is exposure and outcome. So exposure, we can just call it, for instance, risk factors. And outcome, for instance, we can call it a disease or health problem, which might not always be the case. But we can use that analogy just to understand the concepts of exposure and outcome. And then types of epidemiological studies. We have experimental and observational studies. In experimental studies, it's like when an investigator is trying to test a product or is introducing a particular experiment in a study. So we are not going to delve into the experimental designs that much. Here we do, in most of the cases, is observational studies. So observational studies can be descriptive or analytic. And we're going to, digest this for people to understand. So I took this picture from a slide presented by Professor Rafili in our master's program, and it really helped me to understand the concepts of study designs. So like I said, when we talk about the types of studies, we have experimental and observationals. And if you want to differentiate them, ask yourself whether there is, any exposure or, whether there is any experiment or there is non-experiment. If you are not doing an experimental study, you are not testing anything, you are not introducing anything in the study, you are just observing and then writing whatever you observe, then we call it observational study, which I believe is the common type of study design we apply. Then if you are doing an observational study, you also ask yourself, are you just going to describe or are you going to compare? So if there is any comparison, we call it analytical. And if there's no comparison, then we call it descriptive. Now, if there is comparison, there are three main types of designs here. We have the cohort design, where you follow up people over a period of time to find out whether they will develop a particular outcome when exposed to certain exposure. Then there is case control, where we have people with certain conditions and we want to look back to see if they were exposed to certain problems. Then we have the cross-sectional, where we examine the exposure and the outcome at the same time. So cross-sectional study designs can also be descriptive. It basically means a study that is conducted at one point in time. So these are the differences between experimental and observational, which I explained. And then we also have differences between descriptive and analytic. They measure the frequency of a disease for descriptive, and in analytic, they examine the association between exposure and outcome. In descriptive, they seek to explain, and they do not seek to explain any association, they only describe. But when it comes to analytic, they examine cause of an outcome. So they try to answer the question, what is the disease? What is the prognosis? When it comes to analytic, how was the population affected? Those are the questions they want to answer. And why was the population affected? Can this hypothesis be tested? Then when it comes to descriptive, we want to know when the population was affected, where was the population affected, and who was affected. We just want to describe. We don't want to compare anything. But when it comes to analytic study, we want to compare. Then we want to look at, I've explained these things. We want to look at the individual types of studies separately. We made mention that cross-sectional study designs are types of study that examine a population, a snapshot of a population at one point in time. They can be descriptive or analytic. When it comes to cohort studies, they follow up people over a period of time, trying to find out whether being exposed to a particular risk factor will lead to a particular outcome, and they can be prospective or retrospective. Prospective means you follow up people from this year to the next 5 years. Retrospective means reviewing records to find out whether, let's say, if people were exposed to gas explosion 10 years ago and they were admitted at a particular hospital, you went to that hospital, review the records to see those who were exposed, whether they ended up with any health problems. That is what retrospective means here. Then when we talk about case control, we are talking about people who are already affected. Then we look back to see what they were exposed to. This is just for you to understand the concepts of study design. So when we want to differentiate research, we can also use the concepts of qualitative and quantitative. We know that, qualitative and quantitative designs are very, very different. So these are the differences. I will share the slides later if you want to have in-depth reading. Okay, we have what we call mixed methods. This is a combination of both qualitative and quantitative. So there are different types. We have the sequential, we have the concurrent, you may also have other types, but these are the most common ones. So we may have the sequential where you start with a qualitative and later conduct a quantitative in a separate study, maybe to confirm what was done in the qualitative research. In the reverse, you can also start with quantitative and do a qualitative to confirm what was done in the results of the quantitative. Then we have concurrent where you conduct both studies at the same time, both the qualitative and quantitative. Then other aspects of the methodology is the study setting and population. This is the area where you want to conduct the research, and then the population of interest. Who are they? Are they students? Are they healthcare workers? You need to describe this thing in your proposal. And then you need to set a criteria for enrolling and recruiting participants. Are you going to enroll adults? Are you going to enroll children? Are you going to enroll women? Are you going to enroll men? You need to specify this. You also need to do a sampling. The sampling helps you because you cannot interview everybody in the community or in the school or in the hospital. You need to sample. So there are different types of sampling. You have the probability, you have the non-probability, you have the multi-stage where you mixed. So we have the simple random sampling, very common, where you use balloting to select participants. The advantage of probability sampling is that it gives every individual within a particular setting of being selected. The non-probability sampling are selective. You have the purposive, which is judgmental. You select participants based on particular interest or maybe particular experience. Convenience, people who are available on the ground. Snowball, referral method. You have the quota. We also have multi-stage sampling, which is a combination of, it can be a combination of both probability and non-probability. For instance, you may want to conduct a research in Johannesburg here. Then in the site selection, you may do a simple random sampling to select the study site within Johannesburg. Then you may follow it up with a purposive sampling, depending on the type of question you want to answer and the available resources. This also helps you to manage the resources that you have or to efficiently use the available resources to conduct your intended study. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. Now, other aspects of the research proposal are the recruitment of participants. This explains how target participants will be identified in the study. The enrollment process, how will you enroll eligible participants? Is it going to be through maybe a list, having a list? Then from that list, if so and so meet a particular criteria, you select them. Then the data collection talks about the tools like the questionnaire, the interview guide, the checklist that one needs to use to collect data. And we also have data collection procedures. Are you going to use a self-administered questionnaire, survey? Are you going to do an online survey? Are you going to send emails to people to fill particular forms? Are you going to use WhatsApp as a medium? These are all data collection procedures you need to explain in your proposal in detail. Then we also have analysis as part of the research proposal, which describes the statistical softwares that you're going to use to do the analysis. It also explains what type of analysis one needs to employ to generate the intended results. If it is a descriptive study, you can stop at descriptive statistics. If it is analytical study, you can do descriptive and inferentials, where you talk about your logistic regressions, your t-tests, your ANOVA. They are all inferential statistics. This is where you talk about data cleaning, how you manage data. They are all included in the data analysis. Then Another important aspect of the proposal is ethical considerations. If you are conducting a research on human subjects, it's very, very important to write your ethical consideration part properly, because your final ethics approval will be given to you based on this section. It's very, very important. So the Institutional Review Board will give you approval for your study based on this, like I said. And then it includes the following items: scientific design and conduct of the study. You need to mention these things in your ethical consideration part. How are you going to recruit the research participants? The reviewers want to see that you are not going to cause any harm to the participants. You are not going to violate their privacy, their confidentiality. You are not going to violate those things. Community considerations. They want to know which community are you conducting the research. And then if it is a community that have particular certain restrictions against particular things, you need to make sure that you clearly state how you're going to address those issues. Like, you cannot go to certain communities and talk about certain things. People have different sociocultural backgrounds, and people have restrictions in certain things. So it's very important to understand your research setting very, very well, to know the do's and the don'ts in those settings. So there are certain things, special considerations that will be given to the following ethical principles. Any reviewer who is reviewing your work wants to see that the anonymity of your research participants is protected. Because when you collect data, you need to make sure that you de-identify the data, ensuring that even yourself cannot directly identify the study participants from the results. This is very important. And then there should be privacy. Privacy here means that the participants has the right to share whatever information he wants to share, and then you give the person the autonomous decision to share that information. Privacy is very important. Then when we talk about confidentiality, now when you collect information from participants, they give you the information that they want to say. Now, what do you do with this information? Because there are certain information that you will collect are going to be personal. For instance, your informed consent forms are going to contain participants' name. So what are you going to do with these things? And even the actual data may contain certain personal information. What are you going to do with this? You secure the information. It's either you use a secure data repository. It's either you keep it in a locker that will be accessed by only certain individuals who are conducting the research. And you need to clearly disclose this. For how long are you going to keep this data? It's very important to indicate. You need to talk about the Personal Information Protection Act, POPIA. You need to talk about these things in the confidentiality part. Then we have what we call informed consent. Informed consent means that the participant has been fully informed of the research, the methodology, and what it entails. You have explained to the participant what are the potential risks and the benefits, and allow the participant to independently make his or her decision. This is what informed consent means. And you make sure that if it is a written informed consent, the person signs before you start your data collection. And there should be what we call voluntary participation. You don't force, or intimidate someone to take part in your study. It's unethical. So you should allow participants to freely consent to participate in your study without any coercion, and they can withdraw from the study at any time without facing consequences. It's very important to clearly state this in your ethics statement. Then we have what we call potential risks and benefits. You need to also state whether your research is going to cause psychological discomfort, is it emotional or physical risks. There are legal risks also in certain types of studies. If you are conducting a study, let's say on, for instance, let me take the Gambia for example. If you are conducting a research on MSM, which is not, allowed by law, you may be exposing participants to risks, not only legal risks, but even their family members may isolate them. So you need to talk about, how you're going to ensure that you don't expose participants to certain risks. Like we usually say that there's no research without risks, but it is also important to minimize risks as much as possible and maximize benefits. So you need to state the expected benefits. Is it direct or indirect? Direct benefits can be given, money to the participants, financial benefits. It could be health benefits. For instance, in experimental studies, some patients may be treated if they are diagnosed with certain conditions. Those are benefits. Indirect benefits means you are not giving anything to the participants. You are not treating the participant. You are not giving any financial support to the participant. Maybe the only benefit is that the findings would be used to inform, policies which will benefit like the entire population. Then other parts of the proposal should talk about the expected outcomes. What are the anticipated results? Then you also need to do a budget. This is also one of the most important things in a research proposal because research costs money. Every research costs money. So you need to know how much money you need to spend, how much resources. Are you going to need laptops? Are you going to need papers to print? Are you not going to need data analysis softwares to buy? Are you going to need to travel to the place where you're going to collect data? Are you going to pay research assistants to collect the data for you? You need to capture all these things, very, very important. Then there should be what we call timeline. There should be detailed list of intended activities and timelines. If you are doing research for academic purpose, you should know better that there is timeline that you need to finish the proposal, and there is timeline that you need to finish the research for you to be able to graduate within a particular time frame. So having a timeline is very, 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 very important. Then you need to reference your sources. And in the university here, Harvard is the most common referencing type, especially within the Faculty of Health Science. Then the last aspect is the appendices. This is also very important. There may be materials or things that you would want to include in the proposal, but because the files are large, you may want to move them in the appendix section and cite them in the proposal to say appendix A, B, C, and D. It could be data collection tools, your informed consent forms and information sheets, risk assessment forms, gatekeeper application letters, large files, and plagiarism reports. It's also very important to do plagiarism check. Within the university here, we all are able to access, Turnitin to see if we do not plagiarize other people's work, because plagiarism is a serious research misconduct. It's an ethical violation. So one needs to always put at the back of his or her mind that when you are writing your research proposal or your research, you need to acknowledge the sources. And then you also need to make sure that you don't just copy and paste from people's work. Very, very important. Then we move to the next part of the presentation, which is about the approvals from various committees. So within the Faculty of Health Sciences, we have departmental approvals, we have faculty approval, then we have the University of Johannesburg Research and Ethics Committee approval. The departmental approval deals with technical and scientific issues. They need to make sure that your research follows the guideline, it is structured very well, the introduction is well written, problem statement, and literature review, aim and objectives are well written. Your methodology is also well written. Those are the technical checks. Then when it is approved from that committee, then you move to the next one. You submit and wait for them to review and give you feedback. You address the comments, send back. They also look at they do scientific review. Even though they may review the ethics part, but it's not going to be a rigorous review like when it is sent to the UJREC. Then now the final stage of the review is done at the Research and Ethics Committee. This is where they scrutinize the ethics section of your research proposal. They need to make sure that your participants are safe and you yourself conducting the research is safe. This is what they ensure. And they ensure that you don't expose anyone to any harm. Then if they feel satisfied, you are given approval to carry on with your research. Now the next stage is to go and apply for gatekeeper approval. Gatekeeper approval means you need to go and seek approval from the setting where you need to conduct the research. If it is a health facility, you seek approval from the health facility. If you require approval from the Department of Health, you need to submit your proposal with a letter to obtain permission for conducting that research. Very, very important. So we have now come to the end of the presentation, and I want to thank all of you for joining. And I once again want to thank the postgraduate school for giving me this opportunity. I hope we all have learned one or two things. And now, if you have questions, you can bring them forward. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Gabriel.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jayete, for first of all agreeing to facilitate this session. I think this was a very insightful presentation, and we have learned a lot. I'm not from the health science, but I've also learned, quite a number of things that I see that sort of transverse, across social sciences and health sciences. So thank you so much for that. And as you have indicated, we can open the floor for questions and contributions. I just call it an open discussion, segment. So we can discuss. You can share your experiences. You can also, if there's any contribution you want to make, you can also make or ask your question. The mics are unmuted. You simply raise your virtual hand. We acknowledge you. Then you unmute yourself and you ask a question. Alternatively, you can type the question in the chat box, and then I'll bring it to the attention of the facilitator. Thank you. Whilst the attendees are still coming up with the questions and thinking of the contribution that they are going to make to this conversation that we had, I want to remind you again that I have I've posted the feedback survey in the chat box for your access. We kindly ask you to fill this. By filling it, it also enables us to get correct details about you that we'll use to generate a certificate of attendance for this workshop for you. Also, we remind you of the launch of the Research Capacity Development Management System. We encourage you to register on this system. You can access it through ULink, or you can visit www.rcdms.uj.ac.za. Then if you have any questions or any queries, you can contact us on rcdinquiries.uj.ac.za. Or you can also visit our website at www.uj.ac.za/postgraduate school/research capacity development. Let me check on the chat. There's a question, Mr. Jaite. They are thanking you for a wonderful presentation, and the question is, please, I need clarification on the difference between the descriptive and analytical study, where you talked about hypothesis. Does it mean that in descriptive study there's no testing of hypothesis? Please, I need help here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Yes, the difference between descriptive and analytical studies, like I mentioned, is in descriptive studies, you are only describing. Let's say if you want to talk about the prevalence of HIV, you only describe the prevalence of HIV. There's nothing like to say, people who with this particular age are at risk of HIV than those who are not. You don't do this in descriptive studies. You only describe. So there's no hypothesis testing in descriptive studies. But on the other way around, when we talk about analytical study, here you just want to compare an outcome and an exposure, or you want to compare an independent and a dependent variable. So in this case, of course, we are comparing, so we need to test a particular hypothesis so that at the end of our study, we can say that, HIV could be caused by this, or people with this are exposed to HIV. So the answer is there is no hypothesis testing in descriptive studies, whereas it is in analytical studies. I hope your question is answered.
Okay, we can wait to hear from Rosemary. I can see thumbs up as an indication that the question was answered. You also answered it well. I was also following as well. Okay, I see another. That's just a gratitude. Thank you for the fruitful session, Musa. Well done. That is coming from the Rato Oliphant. I see a hand from Yankuba.
Yes.
Let me ask. You can unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Okay. Thank you so much for the excellent presentation, Musa. This is really very helpful to me as a student. I've learned a lot from your presentation. Thank you so much. So I have just some questions, a number of questions. Like you talked about plagiarism. So can you please elaborate on how text similarity can count as plagiarism, even though I cited the author, I indicated the source of information. But let's say I just copy and paste it. So in that case, there'll be, I believe there'll be a lot of text similarity. Can you elaborate on how that would count as plagiarism, even though the source of the information has been cited? And then the second question would be on the data analysis. So would it also be important?
Yankuba, sorry, can you come closer to the mic? I can't hear you very well.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, okay. Apologies. I was saying, you talked about plagiarism.
Yes.
Yes. So, and then said, can you elaborate on how text similarity could
Mm-hmm.
count as plagiarism? Even though
Okay.
I cited the source of the information. So let's say it's a journal, I cited it's an article. Let's say it's a journal
Yeah.
article, I cited the author, but then it's just copy and paste. And then how would that be plagiarism? You can elaborate on that, please? And
Yeah. Sure.
the, the other question would be um, on the data analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, would it be important also to talk about the software that is used? For example, if you use Stata or SPSS or yes, and then the version of it. Then the last one would be what would be some of your recommendations or advice to students, like in terms of making sure that they have they can write a good proposal, yeah, some of the things that they should do and they don't, the do's and the don'ts, that can help them come up with good proposals. Yes. What would be your advice or recommendations or suggestions in a summary?
Yeah, thank you very much, Yankuba. Yankuba is joining all the way from the Gambia. I'm very grateful for your time. And then you have asked very important questions. And the first one was about plagiarism. Yes, plagiarism can occur in different forms. One of the ways is to copy something from someone's work without acknowledging the person. This is plagiarism. You can also take something from someone's work, acknowledge the person, but if you copy and paste directly, it's going to count as plagiarism. To avoid that, you need to paraphrase, whatever statement you are taking from someone's work, paraphrase it very well and acknowledge the original author. And one thing one needs to avoid is these plagiarism softwares are very sensitive. If you copy something from someone's work that is available on the internet and paste it in your work, even if you paraphrase, it is going to pick it as plagiarism. So to avoid that, you can type or have a document where you compile your rough work. Then when it comes to your actual work, you make sure that you don't copy anything from the internet and paste it in your Microsoft Word document. That is why when you copy things from ChatGPT, it counts as plagiarism because one, ChatGPT gives wrong references. You understand? And even if it gives you, let's say, the appropriate references, ChatGPT takes information from different sources. You understand? This is why once you copy something from ChatGPT and have it in your work, someone is able to detect that yes, this one, this is not the proper reference, or it is plagiarized. So on the issue of now you said recommendation on writing a good proposal. Yes, I will just go back to my slide where I made mention of, what a proposal is and how to come up with a good proposal. Okay, in coming up with a good proposal, you first of all need to come up with a very good topic. And your research topic, you need to make sure that it is of interest or it is talking about a current situation or it is talking about something that happened in the past, but it is of interest to a certain group of people. You need to identify your audience. You may also research on something that does not happen yet. Maybe you anticipate that something is happening in the future and people are really talking about it. These are all things that are important. You understand? Then you need to do a literature review. It's a must. You need to do a literature review to be able to know what people have said about that previously. You need to find out gaps what are the recommendations from various studies? What do they recommend? Obviously, a lot of studies will recommend future studies on this. They have identified this and they want future studies to deal with this. You want to see that. This will broaden your perspective about that research problem. You understand? List different topics, like I said, narrow it down, and then review the topics to see which one you think is best. To finalize your topic, you need to discuss with your supervisor. After discussing with your supervisor, now you use your guidelines to write the proposal. And when you are doing the writing now, you need to make sure that you stick to the guidelines. I did not talk about like the font size, the font types you need to follow. All these things are available in your faculty or departmental guidelines. You need to talk about those things. You need to make sure that you write your proposal in accordance to those guidelines. They are very important. And then avoid plagiarism. Read other people's work in relation to your work. See how introduction is written. You can consult ChatGPT. How do I write an introduction? ChatGPT will show you, what are the things you need to include in your introduction. But do not just copy whatever ChatGPT gives you and paste in your work. It is just a brainstorm. Use it to brainstorm. It's going to give you idea on how to go about it. You are doing your methodology. You are not familiar with study design. Consult ChatGPT. I'm doing this type of study. What design do you think best fits? State 3 different study designs for me. Consult people. Consult people, seniors in your department. Ask questions. Talk to your supervisor. Schedule meeting with your supervisor. Supervisors are very, very busy. So you need to schedule meeting with your supervisors. Discuss whatever you want to do. Suggest to them. They will give you the best solutions. Trust me. They will give you the best solutions. Because I have been through it, since from the beginning of my proposal writing, I've been with my supervisors. We agree on everything until my thesis was finally submitted. So involve them. They know better than you. They have more experience than you. Even if they do not have much knowledge about the topic that you are doing. But when it comes to research, they have more knowledge than you. You need to involve them. Basically, I think these are the ways you can write a very good proposal. And you also need to study your research setting. Make sure that your ethical consideration is solid and does not violate the rights of your research participants. Attach whatever important document you need to attach to the proposal. When you are done, give to your friends to review for you. Give to your supervisor to review. Make sure you have a very smooth relationship with your supervisor because it also counts. I've seen situations where supervisors frustrate students. You send this, they ask you to do this. You send again, they ask you to do this just to frustrate you. But if you build a very good relationship with your supervisor, you show your supervisor that you know your stuff, you know what you are doing. You show your supervisor that you are hardworking. You go extra mile, read on your own, bring stuff on the table. Your supervisor will be very impressed and will be ready to support you whenever you approach him or her. Basically, I think this is the way to go. Thank you very much, Yankuba, for that, for those questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jaite, for well-structured answers to the question that was posed by the participant. I just want to add on the issue of plagiarism. Like you have said, plagiarism assumes different forms. If it even goes to the extent that if you do not change the structure of the sentence, then it's still considered plagiarism. You might paraphrase, but the structure of the sentence has to change. It's like singing a song using the same melody, but then you sing it in different words. It's still considered as if you have copied the person who's the original person who sang the song. So plagiarism assumes they are different. I think if you go on the Turnitin website, you will see different forms of plagiarism, and sometimes even certain ways in which we write, we even sort of violate some of the rules that pertains to the issue of plagiarism. So goes as well for self plagiarism as well. If you do not acknowledge, you take credit of work that you have already been credited for before, right? If you have submitted it and you have been assessed, then why submitting it again to be assessed again in a new context? So you have to acknowledge that this work has already been published, or I've drawn from my work that I've previously published, that kind of. But thank you so much for those answers, and also my contribution to the last question about this issue of what one can do. In terms of maybe making sure that you come up with a well-constructed proposal. It's the conceptualization should be a coordinated effort. So which means it should be in something that takes place between you and the supervisor. Don't be given a topic by the supervisor, because you might, at the end, when you are now doing the actual research, you might find that, you are not really sure of what needs to be done. But if you conceptualize together, then even the research process is going to be an enjoyable one. And also yourself, you know what you are doing at each phase of the research writing process. I hand over to, let me see, is this Prof. Palani with the head up? Is it Prof.
Yes,
Edith?
yes, it's Dr. Edith.
Prof, you can unmute yourself and contribute. Thank you for your presence. I saw that you took your time also to be with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the support. You can unmute yourself, Prof, and
sorry.
Contribute. Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. And thank you very much, Dr. Gabriel and Musa. Well done. Wonderful, informative presentation. We are very proud of you. I just wanted to comment briefly on the plagiarism question. When it was asked, the person who asked the question said, would I have plagiarized if I take the statement as it is and then I copy and paste, and then I cite the source? Yes, that would be plagiarism, but if you put it in inverted commas and you make it italics, sometimes there are statements that you want to capture as they are, or quotes you want to capture as they are. You are allowed to use inverted commas and make it italics, and then you cite the source. So it's not that you cannot use direct quotes, but you must use them properly in putting in inverted commas and making them italics.
Thank you so much, Prof, for adding to that. Yes, sure. You can make use of quotations as well. And making the text italics, like what Prof has said. But please don't direct quote the whole section. Don't quote the whole section directly. Thank you so much, Prof. Palan, for that contribution. Let me check again on the chat. Some words of gratitude. Can you explain more the descriptive, analytic, and study setting?
Okay. Hello?
It is a question from Regina that is saying, can you explain more for the descriptive, analytic, and study setting?
And what setting? Study setting.
It's saying study setting.
Okay. Okay. The difference between descriptive and analytic study is, just from the word descriptive, put at the back of your mind that here, I'm only describing what happens. I'm not trying to, explain if there's any cause-effect relationship. I'm not trying to find out if there is I'm not trying to find out what the cause of malaria is. I'm not trying to find out, what the risk factors of HIV is. I'm not trying to investigate what caused a particular problem, or if a particular problem could lead to this, or what risk factors led to a particular problem. In descriptive studies, you are only describing, you are only stating, let's say if it is prevalence study, you are only stating that the prevalence is high or is low. If you are describing knowledge, you are only stating the knowledge of the people. Is the level of knowledge high or the level of knowledge is low? If it is the practice of people, you are describing their practice towards a certain behavior. You are not there to say that their practice was due to this, or their level of knowledge was high because of this. That is not what you are doing in descriptive study. In descriptive study, you are only saying that the knowledge is high or the knowledge is low. If you are describing the presence of disease, you will only say this disease is present or is absent. But you're not going to say this disease is caused by this factor. In descriptive studies, you are basically describing. You are not doing any comparisons, and you do not test any hypothesis in descriptive studies. Now, when it comes to analytic studies, that is where you do comparisons. Like the example I gave, you want to find out what the risk factors of HIV are. You use a descriptive study design. You want to know what the risk factors of COVID-19 are. You use use analytic study design. You want to find out people who died of COVID-19. What risk factors were they exposed to? Did they have any underlying condition? You use an analytic study design to establish that. And there are three main types that I explained in my presentation. One of them is a cohort study. A cohort study can also be called longitudinal study, because with cohort studies, you follow up people over a period of time, and then you collect data at different intervals. Sometimes you may introduce, you may want to evaluate certain things. You may want to you may want to see how they are doing before they finally develop a particular condition. And I also mentioned two items which are very important, is exposure and outcomes. In cohort studies, those things are very important. You are following up people with risk factors to find out if they will develop a condition over a period of time. You want to know whether smoking causes lung cancer. You recruit people, you follow them up over a period of 5 years to find out if those people will actually develop lung cancer. So you find a way of linking that lung cancer to smoking. Then with cohort study is also an analytic study where you look back to see if particular risk factors were responsible for a present disease. Like people who are affected with lung cancer. You follow them up to see whether they were smoking, or whether it was smoking, whether it was, exposure to certain chemicals. You want to establish that. That is when you use case control. Then there's cross-sectional. I made mention that cross-sectional design can be used for both descriptive studies and analytic studies. What cross-sectional means is studying a snapshot of the population at one point in time. It means once you collect data, you are done with the study. You are not going to collect data, come back, collect data again. In cross-sectional studies, you collect data at one point. So if it is descriptive, you collect data to determine the prevalence of HIV. That is it. You describe the prevalence of HIV. It is high, it is low, it is high in this region, it is low in this region. That is the only thing you describe. But you don't say these are the reasons responsible, or these are the factors that influence the increase of HIV. You don't say those things in descriptive studies, in descriptive cross-sectional studies. But when it comes to analytic cross-sectional studies, you examine exposure and outcome at the same time. Let's say you want to investigate the linkage between smoking and lung cancer. At the same time, you want to collect data at the same time, even though there are limitations to this design, but it's possible. You can, examine an exposure and an outcome at the same time. An outcome may not necessarily be sometimes even a disease. You understand? So let's say you want to see factors that are associated with HIV testing. HIV testing is not a disease. But if you are, examining the factors that could influence someone undergoing HIV testing or not, you can use a cross-sectional analytic study design for that. Because at the end of the day, you are comparing two things to find out if there is an existing relationship or significant association between the two variables. I don't know whether I've explained enough for you to understand. If you still do not understand, I will share the slides with you and I will make it more detailed for better comprehension. Thank you.
Mr. Jait, the other question. Okay, actually, Regina, apologized for that question and said instead of being phrased as descriptive, analytic, and study setting, she meant experimental and observational studies.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So in experimental studies, the researcher introduces something. You understand? Let's say you want to test, you develop a drug. You want to see if the drug is effective for malaria. That one, you need to use an experimental design to test that drug. There are different types. There is a type where randomization occurs. There is a type where randomization does not occur. You understand? So when you introduce something, it is experimental design. You want to test the effectiveness of something that you develop. It's an experimental design. But now, if your study is just observing and it's not introducing anything, then you move away from experimental design and go to observational. And in observational, that is where you have, those cross-sectional designs, cohort, case control. You understand? So that is the difference. Observational, you just observe. You do not introduce anything. You don't introduce medicine. You don't introduce an equipment. You don't introduce a testing device. You are only observing. You are only writing. You do not introduce anything. You are only writing and observing people over a period of time. But in experimental designs, now here you want to test the effectiveness of a particular drug. Then you introduce the drug. You have your different sets of people. You have the actual drug, you have the placebo. In randomization, you give these people drugs without telling them which one is the treatment and which one is the placebo. Then at the end of the day, you find out if the placebo and the actual drug have the same effect. This is an example of experimental studies. But when it comes to observational, yes, you can use observational designs to examine this kind of relationship, but not merely introducing something. You can write about what people have done previously. You can analyze a secondary data. You understand? It's an observational study because you are not actually introducing anything. But once you introduce something, it's no more observational. That one you move to experimental designs. And the experimental designs also have their own criteria. But because in the university here, in most cases, what we do is observational study. That is why I did not even go deep into experimental study designs. I don't know if I answer your question properly, you can put it in the chat, please. Any other comment, question, contribution? I want to thank Dr. Edith for joining and also her contribution. I'm really grateful for her support, staying on the call for more than 1 hour means a lot to me, despite her busy schedule. And also the entire PESA team, thank you very much for the support. And then everyone who joined on the call, I'm really grateful for having you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Jait. I think I don't see any. I see one question there that says, "Can you explain more about the explanatory mixed method study?" It's also from Regina.
Okay, in the mixed study methods, we have explanatory and exploratory. So when we talk about exploratory, it means there is a novel issue that you want to investigate. But to gain more insight, maybe you did a literature review and you are not finding any literature on that topic. You want to do an exploratory study to seek the opinion of people, to know what people really think about that and what they know about that. So you start with a qualitative. When you do a qualitative study to explore the perception and experience of people, then you will have an idea to even develop a questionnaire or tools for your quantitative. Then after your qualitative study, you can go ahead and do a quantitative. That is exploratory sequential design. But now when it is explanatory, it means that is not a novel problem. Now you conduct a quantitative study, but you want to confirm your results. Then you go ahead and further conduct a qualitative study to see if your qualitative study confirm the results of your quantitative study or whether they are in disagreement. And the third method was the concurrent method, where you conduct both at the same time. So I don't know whether this answers your question.
Regina, you can indicate okay, I can see a thumbs up. So I think the question is well answered. I think with your permission, Mr. Jaite, can we proceed to concluding the session? I don't see any questions on the chat, and also I don't see any hand that is up. If there's any last question from the participants, any question from the participants before we move on to the closing phase of the workshop? Okay, I don't see any questions. So once again, I thank you for taking your time and agreeing to facilitate this workshop. I think you have shared a lot of great insights with us. It has been a very engaging session with a lot of questions and contributions that were made by the participants. We also thank Prof. Palani for your presence, and also other colleagues who have took time to join us, and those from, did you say Burundi? Mr. Jait?
Gambia.
From Gambia, yes, okay, of course. Thank you so much, the folks from Gambia, for also taking time to support us, and be part of this workshop, So I think, without wasting more time, I will stop the recording for this session. And, any concluding remarks from you, Mr. Jaite?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Gabriel. This was a very big responsibility. Considering the fact that I am still a student, you still decided to, invite me to facilitate this program. It was a big responsibility, and I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity. And I just want to take this moment to, re-echo what I said in the beginning, that I thank the postgraduate office for the trust and confidence that they have in me. I also would like to thank again my supervisor, my PESA colleagues for joining. I know, we are all busy right now with one thing or the other, but they left everything, just to support me on this workshop. I'm very grateful. And for those who came all the way from the Gambia, I am really, 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 really honored for your presence, honestly, because I know you know, it is too early there and it's a weekday. People have to go to work or attend to certain other responsibilities. But despite all that, you made it a point of duty to be present. I'm grateful. And to everyone who joined this event, being a student or a staff, thank you very much for joining. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jayet. And I think with that said, I wish all the participants a great day further, and also thanking you all for continuing to support the Research Capacity Development Unit. Thank you so much. I'm now, concluding this session and also stopping the recording for the session. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.